Manuel Herrera charter class, class of 71. And people's jaws still drop when I tell them about my Callison experience, and I have a lot of opportunity to talk about it because as Silicon Valley, where I live in San Jose, has had an influx of people from India, just a whole community there. I'm always running into people from India, right? And I love to drop into my Indian way of speaking English because I passed 100% of the time when I landed in India to the day I left. You know, at that time I was like 50 pounds lighter, and I really passed. I mean, I just, and I'm not going to go into it now, but the point I want to make, Callison for me was even more radical than designed because I did India, and Jerry Hewitt was my student advisor at the time. When I came back from India, the last time I saw this campus was the first semester of my third year. I never met the class of 72, you know, what have you, because Mickey Gibson had the idea of taking a small group to Mexico, and at the last minute, I signed up, went to Mexico, finished that, and during the summer, I contacted Jerry Hewitt and I said, you know, if I can arrange an internship on Capitol Hill, would you approve my doing my first semester of my final year on Capitol Hill? And Jerry had become Dean of Students. He said, sure. You know? and I go, great. And it was easy. I mean, my congressman welcomed me on board, and they found an apartment for me, and I had a great year on Capitol Hill, great semester. While I was there, Congressman Ron Dellums was elected to his first term, and he hired me onto his staff. And I called Jerry Hewitt, and I said, you know, I got a job here. He says, why don't you just stay there? You know? and so I did my entire senior year on Capitol Hill, working in Congress. And this is why people's jaws drop. I said, first year, seminars, no math and science, just concepts, no grades, you know, just, I loved it. I loved reading, I loved seminars, I loved discussing all these high ideas. India, second year, I mean, a kid out of the East San Jose barrios, I'd never been anywhere, you know, and all of a sudden, Japan, you know, Hong Kong, Bangkok, Calcutta, or Calcutta as they say over there, and so for me, the world just incredibly opened up inside of me, and it changed my life forever, just absolutely forever. I came out of this program more literate, more aware, more connected with the world, you know, as it was, and more. It's like I had a sense of my own capacity to stride onto any place or stage or arena because it all seemed so accessible to me, having gone everywhere and done everything. And one day, you know, working on Capitol Hill, I received something in the mail. I never went to my graduation. You know, it was a diploma, and I said, "Oh, look, social sciences." I didn't, you know, you know, it was great. I said, "This is the way to do school," you know. So, thank you, Callison. Thank you, all you visionaries and risk takers, because you spawned a generation that has gone on just like you changed. The College of the Pacific as you infused it. We've gone on in our lives and touched organizations and our own places in our lives with the same spirit, you know, of possibility and of vision. So, yeah.
I'd just like to add to what Manuel said. Our faculty meetings after the first group came back were very interesting, because we were getting all this feedback from different people and trying to put it all together. Did it fit into the same picture, or were we painting pictures of 5 different subjects? And one thing that was common through all of that was that we could talk about how the class that came back was so noticeably more mature, confident. You had been rowdy during your freshman year, in some cases, but when you came back, there was much more thoughtfulness behind the sense of vitality and what was going on. So that, at least for me, was affirmation that the year abroad did far more than the courses that Job, as important as they were, you were part of a total experience that transformed them, and that was an education.
I'm Jim Graham. I'm Jim Graham, Bangalore 2, And I was one of the people in high school who knew I wanted to go overseas because I'd already traveled in the Far East. And my high school came up here with a group of students, and I didn't want to come to Stockton. Couldn't we go to Santa Cruz? Find out about UC Santa Cruz? We came up and we were put in the Elbert Covell Lounge, and this long series of boring people came and told us about the conservatory and the pharmacy school and the engineering school and COP and all of these other, and the last one was this silver-haired Southern gentleman who stood up and said, well, I can't quite tell you exactly what my school is going to be like because we haven't started yet, but we're going to send everybody overseas to Asia for a year. And I sat bolt upright, and I never applied anyplace else. I think I was accepted before I even took the SATs, which shows you how desperate they were. Yeah, that's the word, desperate. And I came, and here were all these people who were at first real intimidating because they were all such powerful personalities, and went off to India, had a wonderful time. One of the questions that they're going to ask us to talk about is how has Callison affected your life, and it's affected mine at times very greatly because it caused me to sign up to do the University of Pittsburgh semester at sea program because the ship was going to Madras and I'd have 5 days to go back to Bangalore 20 years later and see how it had changed and how it hadn't. That's another whole story. I did semester at sea twice, and about 4 years ago I was at a reunion of semester at sea people from one of my voyages in New York, and we were sitting around talking about the good old days. And one of our faculty, who was an expert on Burma from Princeton, had sailed again. And so we were comparing, how is it to have sailed on 2 voyages, et cetera. And he said, yeah, we had a faculty member from somewhere out your way, and he was teaching film, and but he had a big religion background, and he would say to me, Silverstein, you're gonna rot in hell. And I just looked at him and I said, that had to be Larry Meredith. And so I think the Callison experience, not just for me, but for Larry and Len Humphreys, did semester at sea, and if you have college-age children, I can come up with a wonderful way for you to spend a lot of money on them. Because we may have gone here for $3,200, but those days are long gone. And I think that's one of the things about Callison that makes it so hard to replicate anything. If you have college-age kids, they're probably going to graduate thousands of dollars in debt. Most of us, I think, graduated debt-free. It was a different era. Well, that's because the university gave me a big scholarship.
Hi, I'm Libby Martin. I'm one of the babies, class of '82, when it was Raymond Callison. And I came in as a pre-law major for COP and happened to meet some people at the dining hall where I was working, and they were really cool people. And they kept talking about they were going to Japan and they were going to do all this. And I thought, well, I really don't want to be a lawyer. That's my mom's idea. So I'm going to change my major and not tell her till it's too late. If you've ever met my mother, you'd understand. And so I came in early '79. I think I get to hold the distinction as the last person to enter Raymond Callison, because very shortly after I came in, thank you, Len, for not telling me this, they made it a department of COP. And I'm like, wait a minute, this is not. But I went to Japan and ended up on a rose farm, which for a girl from San Francisco, I still don't know why they did that to me, even though that's what I asked for. Yeah, think you guys would be smarter than that. I graduated, and I went a different route than a lot of people. I got married right after I graduated. But my 4 years as a Ray Keller, 3.5, actually helped me in my marriage because I married an engineer. And if any of you know about electronic engineers, that's like marrying somebody from India or Japan or the moon. Because he was very much an engineer, and he thought this way. And so luckily I was able to give my children a little more of a... But the other thing that it gave me, besides my smart-ass way of talking, which I just realized, Court, I got from you. Watching you and listening to you, I'm going, oh my God, that's me. I got the ability to be flexible. The ability, which I didn't have before too, when something fails or doesn't go the way it's supposed to, before Callison, I would have just fallen apart or had a hissy fit and just demanded that it go back to be the right way. And of course, my way is the only right way. But now I can handle with almost aplomb unemployment, divorce, kids not graduating, kids not going to college. Anything that happens, I can handle, because I learned that it's not the end of the world, that change is good. And I also learned that if you laugh about what's going wrong, it doesn't seem that bad, and you can always find something good when you're laughing. It's very hard to see the black when you're laughing. And that I also got from, I was used to professors, the button down, you know. The first time they told me I was supposed to call them by their first name, I'm looking at them, I'm going, are you kidding? They're grown-ups. I'm from the military. You don't call anybody by their first name. And Bruce LeBrac, my absolute favorite, allowed us to pick on him. I don't know if he allowed us, but we got away with it, much to the concern of a lot of COP students who were in one of his classes thinking it would be an easy general ed requirement. And that ability to just connect with an adult, an authority figure, to learn that no matter what you do, if you're doing your best and you're learning from it, you've probably done okay. That I got. And I gave that to my kids. And so I thank you guys for that and for allowing me in, even though it rumored that that's what caused the collapse, was me coming in. But anyway, thank you all. The other thing I got from you guys is the year I spent in Japan was probably not the easiest year I've ever had in my life. And that sense of exile, of voluntary exile, helped me write my first book. And so I thank you for that, because I don't know if I'd had the courage without you guys. Of course, it took a while for me to get that courage and find it, but it was there, and you put it there. Thank you.
Just 2 points. This afternoon we're going to have a chance to have everybody talk about, not everybody, anybody who wants to talk about the impact this school has had on them. And so if we can kind of keep it to asking the professors questions, that would be good. And the question I have is, can you talk a little bit about the pass-fail system? And what was pass plus, pass, what were the pros and cons, and did you think it was good? And when it went away, I assume it went away too. Can you?
Wait a minute. Right here. Boyd brought this up at every faculty meeting.
They said we don't like to have steps. We don't have 5 steps. I said, well, you got 2. You got yes or no. That's 2 steps. And so you don't have a non-grade system. You don't have a non-step system. That's kind of a logic that I kind of attracted by. And so I guess in a sense of irony, or the religious people would know about this, when when I was toward the end of my stay here, I was given the option, or I guess an option, a choice to convert the letter grades to a grade which we call letter grade equivalent. Now, we never broke our promise to you to not give letter grades, but we did have letter grade equivalents because we'd give the. It isn't funny. So we'd get these poor wretches who'd apply for a job, and the person in personnel would say, "What does this mean? I don't know what that means." And so the personnel people had to have letter grades. And so we were honest to you. We never broke it, but we did have letter grade equivalents. And so I would write a letter that said, if we gave letter grades, this would be... And so I had to read all these letters. And some of them were kind of strange. I'm not going to read them the way you would. But I had 2... Oh, I remember. Well, I did read Cantor's, yes. I would read these letters, and I'd say, what letter grade would that be if indeed we had given letter grades? And so I would sit there and I would ponder this, and I would give letter grade equivalents. And then I'd write a letter to the registrar, and they would send out the transcript, which didn't mean very much to anybody, but they would give the letter grade equivalents, which hopefully would let them think in their pattern they're used to thinking in, and that is grade points. And so that's how it was settled. And so I'd like you to know that we decided to use the coin of the realm, even though we had no coins. And it was to the advantage of the people who, after they were graduated and had to apply for jobs, they did need to talk to employers about the letter grade equivalent. So we kept our virtue, but we got our money too.
Anyone else with a comment on the grading? I know that Boyd was on that all the time. He used to call me up 15 years after somebody had gone and said, what grade should we give this person? And I don't know how you did it. I used to consult the I Ching. It was really worked beautifully, very cross-cultural.
I'm really glad to know that, because when Boyd retired, he passed this task on to me. And I blame all of you, of course, because you're the ones who kept sending in things saying, I know we didn't have letter grades, but now I need them. So for a lot of people, it was not that hard. I mean, most of you know that if you read a series of letters of evaluation from a given faculty member, you could tell what grade he was giving you. Then there were Meredith's evaluations. And there was no way to convert those into anything. They were incommensurable with the world. So I usually just, punted and put pet.
From the faculty point of view, those letters of evaluation were murderous to write. Because by the time you got to number 10, you'd used all of your synonyms for almost any phase of performance. And to try to think of something creative that responded to directly that person, by the time you got to 45, was really a challenge. But I think we were also, getting back to Baxter's original question, what were the advantages of it? We were really in the forefront of what today is becoming increasingly the coin of the realm, to use Larry's term, in higher education, which is the buzzword assessment. And now we're having to weigh very, very carefully every word and what it means. I'm not sure that we're any better off than we were 30 years ago doing it the torturous rate, but we were, I think, ahead of the curve in that way as well as in some other ways. Well, certainly the international component and the significance that, I was just reading while Larry was talking,
My presence did provide literacy.
That's right. I learned how to read. This is the program for the dedication of the Wendell Phillips Center. And I'm struck with how this could have appeared in yesterday's newspaper. No child should grow to manhood in America, without realizing the promise, the peril of the world beyond our borders. Progress in teaching about world affairs must not lag behind in other areas of American education. We were ahead of that. And that statement could be made today. We are probably, taken as a whole, we're not that much farther along. But at least we were there first.
I'm Chris Haslew, and I'm going to make Jack sit down. And I'm going to ignore Baxter. I will have a question, but I just wanted to say, since you're all here, when I graduated from Callison, I went on to graduate school, and I was in a cold sweat because I was going to have to compete with people that took classes like English, biology, algebra, and I want to tell you, with the possible exception of mathematics, sorry, Boyd, I got a fabulous education at this institution, and I was able to compete with the best that came out of both private and public schools in this state. Thank you for that education. And my question is, this was supposed to be an experimental school. Did the experiment work?
Yeah, it worked. Well, you answer. You were the experiment. Did it work? I think I mean, that's not a rhetorical question. It's it's an important one. Clearly, there were things that we thought we wanted to continue within the university, and we have continued them. Study abroad, for example. I mean, what you said about going abroad, changing your life. That's clear. When I send people to England, you don't have to go to Japan. I've seen astonishing transformations. The most rewarding part of my whole career has been seeing students, because I ran study abroad for a while, and to interview students before they went, and then everyone had to talk to me when they came home. That was required. And the transformation in one semester from some bubblehead who went to Paris in order to party and came home a different person. I thought, that's why we're here. That's why we're here.
Jack Delman, Bangalore 2 also. I think that later this afternoon at 2:30 we're going to hear a little bit more about the extent to which it really did work. So I'm not going to answer that. But I wanted to respond to, I think you said, what else, Kathy? There are lots of things that you guys modeled that indirectly affected us all. I'll give you an example. No one mentioned the fact that there was a collaboration going on between the teachers and the students. I sat on one of the committees that did some of the hiring, which included Cortland Smith and Joan Bondurant and a number of other people. And those types of relationships where there was participation between student and faculty, and they were decision-making type of collaboration. The world in which we live, you hear it all the time, the collaborative world. You have to get together, and people are not isolated. You modeled that for us tremendously, and we will be able to show you how we took some of those models and implemented them in our own lives. And I think that's what 2:30 is going to be about. But I also want to thank you because I have been involved in international education for 27 years. That has been my career. And every one of you are in my mind every single day when I think about the decisions that I make and how I learned from you what I have become. And I'll share that a little bit more later. Thank you.
Nancy Finn, Bangalore 2. And I was just wondering if the sort of whole dorm life, the life right in this quad, was part of the plan, or if it was an accident. and what you all thought of it, because it certainly was as important to us, I think, as the overseas experience that,
I was going to ask about the co-ed part of the dorms, and I always heard that we were one of the first campuses to have co-ed dorms. I think they were supposed to be by floor, and then they quickly went to by room. But also, why was Lars living with us? I mean, the real reason?
Oddly, on the way over on the airplane, I was thinking about all the faculty and how we visited each other's homes, and I turned to Barbara and I said, "Where did Lars live? I don't remember." He didn't have a house, did he? I don't know. But I would like to say one brief thing about the living learning community, because we talked a lot about that. And I don't know how long it lasted, but in the first couple of years, we had enough of a budget so that faculty members did not have to pay for their lunch. That may seem like a small thing, but it was to induce them to sit and eat with your students. Now, every now and then we would go into the dining room, and unbelievably, a lot of faculty would be sitting together with those students, and we'd go over there and mention no free lunch tomorrow if you don't sit with a student. But that whole concept was tied up in the planning of the living learning community. And one other thing, Dr. Burns was so committed to trying to create this kind of separate undergraduate experience that he took several of us to England, and we visited all of their colleges. Now, they're very different. And Barbara and I had the great experience of being a fellow at Wolfson College at Cambridge afterward. But the similarity was they lived in a quad and they interacted together with the teachers like we tried to do here.
Co-ed living, of course.
I've tried to forget that, really. It might have been Manuel. I'm not sure, but one of the students told me it's not very romantic to see a woman putting the deodorant under her arm. I think we were one of the first coeducational dormitories, and I'm glad we did it. It was good, and I'd like to hear some of your comments on it this afternoon.
I'd like to pick up on that and Kathy's remark about the fact that Larry somehow put together a really interesting group of people here. Maybe it was partly by accident, maybe it was partly by design. It wasn't that we shared a vision of what to do, that was clear. We shared a vision of what we didn't want to do. We didn't want to have educations like we had, and we didn't want to teach in a conventional situation. And I, to this day, these people have been my friends and my colleagues for my whole career here. Because I've learned from them. I've team taught with most of them. I've stolen their stuff shamelessly. But let me enlarge that because, and this is back to Jack's point, the great thing about the early days here was all the interaction, not just among us, but with all of us. And you guys learned so much from each other because for, again, reasons of design and reasons of accident, there was a unique situation here where you really could interact in the classroom, out of the classroom, in people's houses, wherever. It doesn't go on anymore. You can't get students to come. For years now, you haven't been able to get students to come over or to have an informal time with you. You go out of your way to create sort of structured informality. But there was a kind of a situation where all of the resources that this community could provide one another were available to people. And that was remarkable. That was really a great thing. So that's a part of why I think this was successful. Was just the chemistry of the situation that made education much more possible for you.
Jerry, I'm going to be greedy just a minute. And in the first brochure or maybe this is the second, in the great rhetoric that was written by Larry Meredith and all this group, but we quote Alfred North Whitehead in his book, The Aims of Education, in which he said his real education was not from the wonderful faculty of Cambridge University, but the interaction of what he learned from other students in the halls and dining rooms of that university. So if you find that, there it is.
I'm Paul Hackelman. I'm with Bangalore 3 and class of 72. So an anomaly, a little bit in the structure of things. In more ways than one, thank you. Actually, I want to make a comment, which is I wouldn't trade the experience I had here and the degree that I got from this place for any degree from any school in the world. And I think great degrees. Thank you all. Follow up on your question and kind of piggyback on Jack's comments. I'd love to know a little bit about what went into the thinking about Heritage of Man with 5 professors, and on 4/5 of those times a professor was, I think in your words, Jerry, an advanced student. So I'd love to think about what went into all the thinking behind that.
And some of the wild things we talked about earlier, the coffin, right?
Gil was part of. Gil was part of the original Heritage of Man faculty, as was one of our missing faculty, John Moriarty. And Roger Mueller was, that wasn't part of the original, Roger wasn't, but John was. And
Weldon Crowley.
Weldon Crowley, indeed. And I want to say a word to the group about Weldon before we're done today, if I might.
Well, Larry Jackson asked me in the first week I think I was here, I'd like you to be the facilitator for the Heritage of Man course. And my God, 3 or 4 other faculty, and we started okay, we're going to do Heritage of Man, we're going to do the West because we're going to the East in the sophomore year. Okay, I think we did things like, next meeting you bring a list of 10 books that everybody has to read before, and oh my God, the complexity, and I'll give up this one if you'll give up that one, because I do not want to teach that one. Okay, blah, blah, blah. And went back and forth, and then finally I think the first year we did sort of the Greek, Hebrew, the Greek civilization, Hebrew civilization, and then second semester we did Renaissance up until the present. But these were great times. We had a student give one of the lectures, and Larry always was a treat. I mean, he gave a lecture on the hippies, and he came out there with a feather in his hand, sitting, my God. I mean, and you guys were real hippies, and he was playing at as a hippie. And so some of it was ridiculous, but Van Alstyne came in there. It was a great learning experience for the faculty, because we all came out of different disciplines, and we all were suddenly teaching books that often we hadn't read before, and so on and so forth. So it was a process. But it was fun at the beginning, and there were some I remember, especially Weldon Crowley. I ain't teaching that book, and we'd go back and forth. But I don't know if you have any more specific questions on that, but it was a great process, a great learning. I think my first 7 years here at the university, I did not teach the same course once. And I don't think I taught a book twice in those 7 years, the same book. So it was just, I was teaching Indian literature and Japanese literature and Nehru and Gandhi and reading Renaissance political philosophy, which I hated. And so it was just a grand learning experience. And then we had these small seminars, and you guys were wonderful, and the questions and so on. So it was to come out of graduate school, University of Chicago, very ordered and structured, and come into this world. And we've talked about how wonderful it was, that the faculty that was gathered together, and how well we worked together, how much we respected one another. But you guys too, you were amazing that you came here and shared in this with us. So hats off to you.
Since you raised the name Weldon Crowley, and he was part of that, he argued vociferously again at every faculty meeting for the autobiography of Benvenuto Cellini or something. It's one of those things, we had to read that. He could teach that. And he also assigned the students in Heritage of Man, all of you had to somehow go to the Lodi dump and pick out 3 artifacts that represented our culture. That was one of the assignments. Very strange. Weldon was strange, as you know. He was the most popular professor at COP when Larry convinced him to come into the Callison experiment, saying he would be the first director of the overseas campus. And he came in and did a marvelous job the first year, and then he went to India. And as you know, he wanted everything in order in his life, in his everything. The keys had to be in place, the books had to be in place, the lectures organized, everything. And India was just about the last place that you'd want to send somebody like Weldon. But he went, and as you know, he fell on very hard times, and he nearly lost he lost almost his life in an ocean of alcohol. Not just there, but when he came back here, he was the second preceptor. Doug Moore was the first preceptor, and when Larry left, Doug was elevated as the provost, and Weldon was over here in the Callison Lodge as preceptor, and he went steadily downhill. When he left here, he left to go to Ramapo College in New York, and alcohol nearly killed him there. He went into a facility for 5 days. It was very, very close as to whether he would live or die. And he came out, and if I ever knew a born-again person, it was Weldon Crowley. And he went to college finally in Florida, got himself together, and then became the Lucy B. King Chair of History at Southwestern University. Southwestern University is one of the finest of liberal arts colleges in the South, and he became so well thought of there that every year, almost, he won Best Faculty Award until they finally just retired it. And they made him, they literally made him, they had a big celebration, they made him Mr. Southwestern. I just say that for Weldon, and while I'm saying that, Doug Moore was also part of that early heritage program. And of course, Doug's not with us now because he died, he went on from here to become president of 2 colleges, including Redlands, and died at Redlands. It was too early, too soon, and he was such a marvelous person. He was my closest and deepest friend, and I miss him to this moment. And we've lost others too, you know. We lost Mort Goldstein, Van Alstyne. Marie Shaw died about a month ago, suddenly. Alan Wilcox, of course, yes. And Margaret Cormack. In fact, Marilyn, last time I saw Marilyn was at Margaret's memorial. And so, yes.
Jane Bondurant.
Joan Bondurant and so forth. So they're gone, and I hope that your standing ovation in the beginning for us here also applies to all these who contributed so much of themselves to making this what it really is, a life-changing experience. And I would just say that it isn't seeing new places. That wasn't Callison. As they said to us so many times, it's not seeing new places, it's seeing old places with new eyes. And that's what we have, new eyes. I certainly had them. And Ned, I feel born again too by the Callison experience. I really did. I recorded this, by the way, and I was able to publish a book in 2000, and it was on my experience of what happened to me going to India, not only going to India, but especially Japan. And what it really meant to encounter other people, other ways of being alive, and how to come to terms with that out of an absolutist stance, which was my heritage in Texas. And this is part of my own experience. I just say that. Thank you.
Hello?
Glad you mentioned it.
I'll hold it.
It's called Life Before Death. I thought that would be the best time. you better move. It's called Spiritual Journey of Mind and Body.
And where's it on sale, Larry?
Next one's going to be Life After Death, right?
Where can we buy it, Larry? Where can we buy it?
It's a very long book. Well, I don't. There it is, Life Before Death. That's
I understand it's available at the university bookstore.
I'm Pamela Leary. I was the person who wrote the Transcending Reality on a Monday Night that was pulled out of the briefcase over there. If those of you who know what Transcending Reality on a Monday Night is all about, it was really existential space religion of the body was a 4-hour class on every Monday night that we were privileged to be a part of. And so I just wanted to clarify that as well. I'm one of those, I'm one of that weird class that I'm 79, I came here. 78 I came here. I was a year on campus. Then went to Japan in 79, and they say I'm in the class of 80, which is euphemistic because I never graduated. So every time you say this thing about the degree, I kind of go. But we had the notification when we were over in Japan that we were going to become a department, and we didn't feel like we had a home. And so many of us did drop out and stayed in Japan indefinitely, and some of my classmates are still over there many years later and haven't come back yet. So they're here in spirit. But I had the unique experience of going to UC Santa Cruz that claims to have a cluster college system. And I have absolutely no sense of identity with Merrill College, where they arbitrarily assigned me in Santa Cruz. And it's a really interesting thing to have gone to something that portended to be a cluster college. And certainly there were individual professors who created the ambience that I had experienced here. But, the scale of it, it's just not scalable. I'm in a financial services person now, and all I talk about is scalability. But, this experience is incredibly unique, having gone and seen that Santa Cruz attempt to emulate what we had here. So I just want to say, you went up in my personal experience with a very well endowed, heavily, structured, beautiful campus, and we had our, club, what we called the Santa Cruz Club, Club Slug Med. That was Slug Med, and we had a great environment. It wasn't Stockton, but my personal identity has really come, and not my degree, which came from Santa Cruz, really came from you guys. So I just want to say, that contrast is just so strong in my mind, and you just accomplished a tremendous amount just on kind of a shoestring and on your own energy and guts and just sheer doggedness, I guess. So thanks for that. And any of you who had been in I don't know if you had any relationship with Santa Cruz, but they certainly didn't take much from you guys and learn from you, but they should have.
Some years ago, there was an advertisement on television in Australia, and it was this travel company. And showing flashes of wonderful places from Bangkok to Tokyo to Prague to New York. And they were touting their wares and saying how great they were at organising travel for people. But the punchline was, we can arrange all of this in this wonderful accommodation and so on and so forth, and it will be as if you've never left home. And at the time, and still, I am bemused and bewildered by that notion. Precisely, why would you go? And in contrast, there's an English author by the name of Roald Dahl, and he talked about the inner experience of the journey. Now, one has to be open to that inner experience, and I think the wonderful thing about Callison College and let's not forget the size of Callison College was very important because that facilitated it. It also had some problems. I'm not sure we ever reached an optimum size. But it was you guys coming with that openness so that you had moved from home. And when you went to India and Japan and wherever you went, and subsequently, you were open to home. You were open, and all you opened yourself to has borne fruit. And that was one of the things I carried with me when I went back to Australia, because the years here had been very, very important for me, for Elizabeth. Sadly, she didn't appreciate the fullness of the love and affection that was surrounding all. One of the things about which I'm very pleased and proud is that I was able to work with one of my dear friends at the University of New South Wales who'd done a study, he was a psychologist, on the experience of some international students. And out of that we were able to build a momentum to develop first an international student centre and then a big international program which still remains focused on students. So there's a legacy for Callison College in you, in us, and even in Australia.
This is for Job Thomas, who's been sitting there quietly, much against his better judgment, I'm sure. And Gil had mentioned that at University of Chicago, he came from a rather buttoned-down environment, but I doubt that it was anywhere as near as buttoned down as the academic environment that Job Thomas came from in India and higher education. And so I'm just wondering just how it was, what your reactions were, and how it is that you probably alone, I think, among the Indian professors, were able to deal with this group of mad people and our lack of structure? Oh, Ned Dominic.
You shouldn't have asked that question, let me tell you that. Well, now we have a semester India program, Davidson's program. It's considered the best in the country, I think. And we have run it for 14 years. So when I think of the Callison program, which I often do, the comparison sometimes is not bad. Correct. The contexts are very different. Davidson's environment is very different. Nevertheless, with my love for Larry and Gil and Boyd and all that, if I am to select a director to go to India, none of these people would have been selected. Honestly, with all me, there are very few people whom I love. Larry gave me the job. Now we say, if you want to be the director, what is your field? Have you lived in India? Have you worked with students? What is your field of specialization? That's it. And if I am to select students to go to India, none of you would have been selected. Okay. Do you have any courses relating to India? What is the most challenging experience in your life? Write it down. Let us read it. That kind of questions we ask, and then we filter it. And then we send them to India, and in India, of course, we have a large establishment, a council of 15 advisors, and a battery of 20 people, and 2 counselors trained in the United States and India, and 2 counselors here who have been to India are here. So for these 15 students, we have this extraordinarily large infrastructure, which we think is essential. And the program is calibrated to the accuracy of 15 minutes. And then, just before I go, I'll tear up a page and ask the director, now, this has happened, how are you going to handle it? So we have this extraordinary structure and we have this extraordinary looseness. And when I think of the Callison experience, you came there without, any exposure to India, no orientation, nothing, no courses relating to India. And on your return, you did not have anything relating to India. Basically, how the Callison program existed in India. Was it integrated with this and that? Nevertheless, whenever I talk with Davidson students, I always refer to the Callison experience. And I will say the resiliency of all of you. The support, when I talked about the American directors, you must think about the Indians. I had never been to India. And Magal had been to United States, even though the only thing he talked about was bourbon and nothing else. And Weldon had good company there. And it was a tough time, actually, when I said that they should have had some experience with India, because it took a heavy toll on the directors. And Larry escaped alcoholism. I think so. And, that was a big escape. Chet Williams, sometimes we'll get into that binge. And, but the program succeeded largely because the students were very resilient. And actually, I remember when we go on field trips, when Davidson students go on field trips, we know of the extraordinary amount of, effort and the organization, planning, and this and that goes in. And I remember I took a group first year to Mahabalipuram, and we had this enormous amount of money, and Weldon was, of course, presiding over the budget, and I received 67 rupees towards expenses. 67 rupees, in the present day, $1.50. And I was taking about 20 students all the way to Mahabalipuram on a field trip and coming back, and the students didn't even complain about it. Okay, that way you were really very, very strong and resilient. And I tell the Davidson students, you're all spoiled brats. You can read Sanskrit. Of course, people who come there who can read Sanskrit, but they cannot deal with a very ordinary situation as you all had done. So, in some sense, the lack of structure, it was an extraordinary, dangerous experience. And we were, by God, extraordinarily lucky. Unbelievably lucky. Yeah, we were lucky. Because when I look at some of the other overseas experiences, Grinnell student goes and is, killed by a sadhu in the Himalayas. And when we had to look at all of you, the travels that you did and the independent study projects that you did, You know, Ned wrote a paper on the hippies of India. In the process, he almost became one. And continued on it for 2 more years. And his paper was the one on which the Bangalore police operated on the hippies. Yes. They read the Bangalore police, the manual in which they had to deal with the hippies was Ned's paper.
They didn't pay me.
They didn't arrest you. You should be grateful for that. Like that, this group showed tremendous strength, and actually that strength came largely because it was not calibrated to the accuracy of 15 minutes. And, you know, I was absolutely new to American students, and actually when sometimes they would ask, you know, when you came to United States, did you have a culture shock? I said, I had a culture shock in 1968. When 70 students landed there, you know. Of course, you know, Davidson is very buttoned down, and I continue to be, as you can see. But I really enjoy the crankiness, the quickiness, the hippiness. That I really miss when I take the Davidson students. I really miss that. So this is what I wanted to tell you. I don't know, what shall we say? Actually, I'm not saying this to win your applause or whatever it is, when there is no need for me. But you are extraordinarily strong, and I do not know where it came from, and we didn't design it. We never thought about it. And it worked. And I tell you, we are lucky, and you are extremely strong. And I do not know whether I answered what you wanted to ask, but this is actually, I said, we introduced that independent study project for Davidson students. And we didn't succeed, even though we had enormous academic force, because we didn't have a 250,000 book library in India. The Davidsons couldn't work on that environment. Whereas you could, maneuver your way through various things, and you could do it. So actually, I said that part of the reason for the success of the Davidson program, which I do, is largely because of the 4 years experience I had with all of you.
We're going to try to stay on schedule, and apparently we have lunch, and I don't even know where it is, but do we know where lunch is? It's right where breakfast was. And I hope to see you this afternoon. We are going to have a little presentation. I know some of you feel strange about administrators, but, I was a dean.